You're nothing but dead weight, Victoria said with a smug smile as she circled my desk. We're tightening the budget, and honestly, your role isn't needed anymore. The office went completely quiet. 20 coworkers froze at their keyboards, pretending to stay busy while clearly listening as our CEO tore apart my 3 years at Montgomery Pharmaceuticals in front of everyone. You barely add value in meetings, she went on, her voice carrying across the open office. You challenge systems that have worked for years. Your reports are always late. None of that was true. Still, I stayed calm. My hands rested neatly in my lap, my expression steady. You have until the end of the day to clean out your desk. HR already has your paperwork. Victoria's heels clicked loudly as she walked away. She didn't bother lowering her voice when she added, "Some people just don't get what it takes to survive in this industry." I smiled and answered simply, "Fine, fire me." Victoria stopped mid-step. My quiet acceptance clearly wasn't what she expected. She had been waiting for tears, excuses, maybe even begging. Instead, she got calm confidence. "My name is Eve Montgomery. I am 47 years old. And what Victoria doesn't know is that I own 87% of the company that carries my family's name. 3 years ago, after my father passed away, I stepped away from the public spotlight at Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. His death left me with controlling interest, and the board decided to bring in an outside CEO to guide the company forward. That's when they hired Victoria King to lead what they called a new phase of growth. What they didn't realize was that I had plans of my own. Instead of observing from a distance, I wanted to see how the company truly operated from the inside. I changed my hairstyle, used my mother's maiden name on my ID badge, and accepted a mid-level role in research analytics. I blended in. I became invisible, just another employee. For 3 years, I watched closely. I documented cost-cutting decisions that lowered quality. I saw skilled employees leave after being humiliated by Victoria and her inner circle. I watched our once supportive workplace turn into a toxic environment built on fear and favoritism. I had planned to stay undercover for another 6 months, but Victoria's public humiliation pushed my timeline forward. The shareholders' meeting tomorrow would now serve a very different purpose than the routine quarterly update Victoria was preparing for. As I packed up my desk, I noticed Alan from legal watching me with concern. Alan had worked at Montgomery Pharmaceuticals since before I was born. He was also one of only 3 people who knew who I really was. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, glancing toward Victoria's office. "I will be," I told him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She's planning more than you know. There's a termination list for tomorrow's meeting." He paused before adding, "It's long. Entire departments." My shoulders tightened. This was worse than I expected. Victoria wasn't just reshaping company culture. She was tearing apart the foundation of the business to inflate short-term profits. "Thank you, Alan," I said, meeting his eyes with understanding. "I'll see you tomorrow." Montgomery Pharmaceuticals isn't just a company to me. It's my legacy. My grandfather started it in his garage, creating affordable alternatives to overpriced medications. My father grew it into a respected mid-sized company known for innovation and integrity. We never aimed to become a massive pharmaceutical giant like our competitors, and that was intentional. Our mission was always balance: profitable enough to fund research, ethical enough to put patients before profits. When my father died suddenly from a heart attack, I was working in our Seattle research division. The board, worried about investor confidence, pushed to appoint a new CEO quickly. Even though I had the experience and controlling interest, I suggested we search externally for fresh leadership. Victoria King looked perfect on paper: an MBA from Stanford, senior leadership roles at 2 major healthcare companies, a strong record of boosting profits. Her interview was flawless. She spoke confidently about protecting our core values while driving smart growth. The board was impressed. I was cautiously hopeful. My decision to work anonymously inside the company wasn't typical, but it was necessary. I needed the truth, not polished reports filtered through executive offices. I created a new identity as Eve Daniels and used my background in pharmaceutical research to land a role focused on analyzing efficiency in our development pipeline. During Victoria's first year, the numbers looked good. Profits rose by 18%, and we expanded into 2 new therapeutic areas. But from where I sat, troubling patterns began to appear. Research budgets were quietly reduced. Longtime employees were replaced with contractors. Quality control steps were trimmed until they became risky. In meetings, Victoria presented herself as a bold, forward-thinking leader. But behind the scenes, the cost of her success was becoming impossible to ignore. She was charming, sharp, and remarkably skilled at making hard choices sound both reasonable and progressive. She talked confidently about strategic shifts and operational efficiency, all while slowly dismantling everything that made Montgomery special. I tried raising concerns the right way. As Eve Daniels, I submitted detailed reports outlining possible quality risks. I spoke during department meetings. I suggested alternative solutions that protected our standards instead of weakening them. Each time, Victoria brushed me aside. Eventually, she labeled me a negative presence in my performance review. At first, I respected her ambition and determination. I truly believed she wanted to improve Montgomery, even if her vision differed from my family's. But watching her day-to-day decisions revealed what really mattered to her: quick profits, personal advancement, and absolute control. The day before I was fired, I overheard Victoria talking with our CFO in the break room. "Once we trim these departments and shift production overseas, we'll be perfectly positioned for the Axiom merger," she said. "My bonus will be astronomical." Merger. It was the first time I had heard anything about a merger. Plans that would require approval from the board, approval from shareholders, approval from me. The morning after my termination, I stepped into my apartment building's lobby and found Diane from Human Resources waiting for me. The tension on her face made it clear this wasn't a friendly visit. "Ms. Daniels," she began, clearly nervous, "I have your separation agreement." She handed me a thick envelope. "Ms. King asked me to personally make sure you understand the confidentiality clauses." I skimmed the pages, noting the heavy non-disparagement language and the insulting severance offer: 2 weeks' pay in exchange for giving up my right to speak about anything related to Montgomery. "There's one more thing," Diane added, handing me another document. "This is a notice that your company-subsidized apartment must be vacated within 30 days. I had forgotten that my building was part of Montgomery's employee housing investments. Victoria was clearly eliminating every loose end. "Thank you, Diane," I said calmly, accepting both papers. "I'll review everything carefully." She shifted uneasily. "There's something else you should know. It's not official yet, but—" She lowered her voice. "Victoria plans to outsource the entire research division to India. Over 100 people will lose their jobs after the quarterly meeting." The research division was the heart of Montgomery. Dedicated scientists who had developed life-changing medications. Many of them had been with the company for decades. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because it's wrong," she replied without hesitation. "Your reports were right. The quality issues were real. 2 of our trial medications failed final stage testing because of the shortcuts she pushed through." She buried the results and fired the team leaders. This was far worse than I had imagined. Victoria wasn't just altering company culture. She was putting patient safety and our scientific integrity at risk. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "I know that wasn't easy." After Diane left, I sat alone in the lobby, absorbing everything I had just learned. My decision to stay anonymous had revealed the truth, but the cost was devastating. How many careers had been harmed? How many patients had been put in danger? My phone buzzed with a message from Alan. "Meeting moved up to 10 a.m. Victoria presenting new strategy to board and key shareholders." Merger announcement expected. She had sped up the timeline, likely hoping to push her plan through before anyone could organize resistance. I checked the time. It was 8:30 a.m. I had 90 minutes. In my home office, I opened the contingency plan I had been quietly preparing over the past year. It outlined a full leadership restructuring, renewed investment in our core values, and protections for the employees who truly made Montgomery what it was. I had hoped I would never need it. Victoria had left me no choice. As I got ready for the meeting, pulling on the tailored suit I hadn't worn in 3 years, a mix of emotions settled in. Disappointment that Victoria had betrayed the company's trust, anger at how easily she discarded loyal employees, and guilt that my experiment had allowed so much damage to happen under my watch. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Alan. Victoria's assistant accidentally sent me tomorrow's press release draft. They're announcing the closure of the Seattle facility. 230 jobs eliminated. My grandfather had started the company in Seattle. My father later expanded that facility, creating hundreds of stable, well-paying jobs in a community that depended on them. This wasn't just a business decision anymore. This was personal. Victoria hadn't only attacked the company, she had attacked my family's legacy. I slid my tablet into my briefcase, my resolve firming. It was time to stop hiding. Montgomery Pharmaceuticals occupied the top 5 floors of a modern building in downtown Chicago. I walked through the main lobby, giving a polite nod to the security guards who didn't recognize me in my executive attire. Instead of taking the standard elevator down to the analytics department on the 3rd floor, I swiped a key card I hadn't used in 3 years and stepped into the executive elevator. The boardroom sat on the top floor, a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. As I approached, Victoria's voice carried clearly through the slightly open door. "This is an unprecedented opportunity for growth," she was saying. "The Axiom merger will position us to compete with industry leaders while delivering exceptional value to our shareholders." I paused. She was already presenting the merger as a done deal. "What about the research division?" someone asked. It was Harold Jensen, our longest-serving board member. "Research can be conducted far more cost-effectively elsewhere," Victoria replied smoothly. "We're eliminating unnecessary expenses to make ourselves more attractive to Axiom. On that note, I've prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan." That was enough. I pushed the door open and walked in. 14 faces turned toward me. Shock, confusion, and in Alan's case, carefully hidden satisfaction. Victoria recovered quickly. "I'm sorry," she said sharply. "This is a private meeting. Security will escort you out." She reached for the phone, but Harold spoke first. "Eve, is that you?" "Yes, Harold," I said calmly, placing my briefcase on the table. "It's been a while." Victoria's hand froze midair. "Eve?" she repeated. "As in Eve Montgomery?" "That's correct," I confirmed. "Majority shareholder and former CEO." The color drained from her face. "But you're Eve Daniels from Analytics." "A necessary step to understand the company from the inside," I replied, addressing the entire room. "And what I've learned has been very revealing." "This is highly inappropriate," Victoria said, trying to regain control. "Ms. Montgomery, while we respect your interest, this meeting is for current leadership to present our strategic direction." "A strategy that includes shutting down our Seattle facility, outsourcing research, and merging with Axiom Pharmaceuticals," I interrupted. "All without board approval or a shareholder vote." The room went quiet. Several board members exchanged uneasy looks. "These are preliminary discussions," Victoria insisted. "Nothing has been finalized." I opened my briefcase and removed a document. "Then why does this press release, scheduled for tomorrow, announce these decisions as finalized?" I placed copies in front of each board member. Victoria stiffened as she recognized the document her assistant had mistakenly sent to Alan. "This is a misunderstanding," she said tightly. It's just a draft exploring possible scenarios. Then perhaps we should also discuss your termination of Eve Daniels, I said evenly, along with the pattern of dismissing employees who raised valid concerns about quality and safety. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She was underperforming. The documentation is clear. So clear, I replied, that you publicly humiliated me in front of the entire department, immediately revoked my housing, and offered 2 weeks severance after 3 years of service. The board members watched in growing discomfort. Victoria sensed her grip slipping. I understand you're emotional, she said, shifting to a softer tone. But these decisions, while difficult, are necessary for Montgomery's future. The pharmaceutical industry is changing, and we must evolve. For a brief moment, her confidence made me hesitate. She was skilled at framing damaging choices as unavoidable progress. It was easy to see why the board had trusted her. You're right about one thing, I said at last. We do need to adapt. Victoria smiled, sensing momentum return. I'm glad you see that. Which is why, I continued, as the majority shareholder of Montgomery Pharmaceuticals, I am calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in your leadership. Her smile vanished. You can't do that. Actually, Alan said, sliding a document toward her. According to company bylaws, she can. Victoria's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. The board appointed me CEO. Only they can remove me. With respect, I said calmly, that's not entirely true. I distributed another document around the table. Article 7, Section 3 of our corporate charter grants the majority shareholder emergency removal authority if the CEO acts against company interests without board approval. The board members leaned forward, reading carefully. Victoria remained standing, gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The merger discussions were preliminary, she insisted. Nothing has been signed. But actions have already been taken, I replied. Employees were terminated. Quality protocols were weakened. Public announcements were prepared, all without authorization. Harold Jensen cleared his throat. Eve is correct about the charter provision. However, these allegations deserve full discussion before we proceed. I nodded. I agree, which is why I prepared this. I connected my tablet to the room's display. The screen filled with a detailed timeline of decisions made under Victoria's leadership. Research budget cuts disguised as efficiency improvements, quality control reductions buried in technical language, employees terminated after raising concerns, failed drug trials that never appeared in reports presented to the board. Where did you get all of this information? Victoria demanded. I worked inside this company for 3 years documenting every decision, I replied. But what truly worries me is this. I moved to the next slide. The screen displayed a financial analysis showing that while her changes had increased short-term profits, they had also created serious long-term dangers. Pending lawsuits from patients suffering side effects from rushed drug development. Possible FDA violations that could lead to massive fines. And the impending loss of our most experienced researchers. The board members grew visibly uneasy. Victoria sensed the shift and immediately changed her approach. Even if there were a few procedural oversights, she argued, the results are undeniable. Profits are up 42% since I became CEO. Our stock price has nearly doubled. At what cost? I challenged. Our reputation for quality, patient safety, the institutional knowledge of employees who built this company. Business requires difficult decisions, Victoria replied dismissively. Your father understood that, even if you don't. The mention of my father struck a nerve. My father understood that Montgomery's success was built on integrity and innovation, I said firmly, not cutting corners for fast profits. Victoria smirked. Your father also understood the importance of professional leadership. He specifically requested that an experienced CEO take over after his death because he didn't trust your abilities. The words hit hard. Had my father truly doubted me? Had he shared those thoughts with her? That's not true, Harold interrupted sharply, anger breaking through his usually calm tone. Robert Montgomery never said anything like that. I was his closest friend on this board, and he was incredibly proud of Eve's contributions to this company. Relief washed over me, followed by renewed resolve. Victoria was lying, trying to shake my confidence. Ms. King, Harold continued, I think it's time for you to step outside while the board discusses these matters. Victoria's expression hardened. I don't take orders from... Security can escort you if needed, Harold said calmly. After Victoria reluctantly left the room, the board erupted into anxious discussion. I stayed quiet, giving them space to absorb everything they had learned. Eventually, Harold called the room to order. Before we vote, there's something else you all need to know. He looked directly at me. Victoria hasn't only been planning a merger. She's been negotiating to sell Montgomery's proprietary research to Axiom separately. Research Eve's team developed before Victoria ever arrived. Shocked murmurs filled the room. This was no longer just about cost cuts or layoffs. Victoria had been preparing to sell the company's most valuable work, innovations that could help millions of patients, for her own benefit. How do you know this? I asked. Harold slid a folder across the table. Because Axiom approached me last week, assuming I was already aware of the deal. Inside were emails between Victoria and Axiom's CEO. They discussed selling our research portfolio for a fraction of its value, along with a large consulting fee paid directly to Victoria. The betrayal was complete. Victoria hadn't just compromised the company's values, she had betrayed its very mission. The board's vote was unanimous. Victoria would be removed immediately. Still, removing her wasn't enough. The company culture was damaged. Trust was broken. We needed safeguards to ensure this could never happen again. We need to announce this change before markets close, said Elise Chen, our marketing director. Otherwise, rumors will spread. And what about the Seattle facility? Another board member asked. And the research division? Victoria's team has already started those processes. I have a full transition plan ready, I assured them, but we must act quickly. Victoria won't go quietly. As if on cue, the boardroom doors flew open. Victoria stormed back in, followed by two men I didn't recognize. This emergency board meeting violates proper notification procedures, she announced confidently. My legal team agrees that any decisions made today are invalid. The two lawyers behind her nodded. One stepped forward. As outside counsel for Montgomery Pharmaceuticals, I must advise the board that proper protocols for CEO removal have not been followed. You are not our outside counsel, Allen said, standing. Brenner and Associates has represented Montgomery for 30 years. Not anymore, Victoria said smugly. I terminated that firm last month. Collins and Westfield now represent us. This was an unexpected complication. If she had changed legal counsel without board approval, it could create confusion and delay her removal. Markets would close. Rumors would spread. She might gain time to push her agenda forward. This is unacceptable, Harold objected. Changing legal counsel requires board approval. Which I obtained, Victoria replied, producing a document. 3 board members signed off. I examined the paper. 3 signatures appeared at the bottom. Board members Victoria had personally recruited after becoming CEO. We should adjourn and resolve this properly, one of her supporters suggested. Rushed decisions could expose us to liability. Uncertainty crept into the room. Board members exchanged hesitant looks. I needed to act immediately. Before we continue, I said, I'd like to introduce someone. I pressed the intercom. Please send in our guest. The door opened again. An older man in an immaculate suit entered calmly. Good afternoon, he said. I apologize for the interruption. Victoria's face went pale. Jerome Collins, she whispered. What are you doing here? Collins, the founding partner of her so-called new law firm, gave her a polite nod before turning to the board. I'm here at Ms. Montgomery's request to clarify an important matter. Collins and Westfield has never been retained by Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. He paused. The document claiming otherwise appears to contain a forged signature from my office. The room went silent. Victoria's lawyers exchanged nervous looks. Additionally, Collins continued, impersonating legal counsel constitutes fraud. These gentlemen, he gestured toward the men beside Victoria, are not attorneys at my firm. One of them quietly moved toward the exit. I have also reviewed the corporate charter Miss Montgomery provided, Collins added. Her authority as majority shareholder is unmistakable. Victoria's final attempt to regain control was unraveling. Still, she had one last argument. Even if you remove me, she said, turning to the board, you can't undo the agreements already in place. The Seattle closure and the research outsourcing plans have already been filed with regulators, Victoria insisted. Actually, I said calmly, no regulatory filings have been submitted. I verified that myself this morning. And the preliminary agreement with Axiom? She pressed. Requires board approval, Harold said firmly, which it never received. Victoria's face twisted with anger. You planned this from the start, didn't you? She snapped. Working undercover, collecting evidence. You set me up. No, Victoria, I replied evenly. You did that yourself when you chose short-term profits over this company's integrity. She turned sharply toward the 3 board members she had appointed. You need to back me now, she said urgently. Remember our conversations about your compensation packages after the merger. The suggestion of improper arrangements hung heavily in the room. 2 of the board members shifted uncomfortably. The third straightened in his chair. Ms. King, he said carefully, are you suggesting there was a personal agreement tied to the merger? Because that would be a serious breach of fiduciary duty. Victoria realized too late what she had implied. Her final support on the board disappeared in that moment. As security arrived to escort Victoria and her fake legal team from the building, I moved to the head of the table. The seat had always been mine. I had simply needed to claim it again. The following morning, I arrived early for the company-wide meeting I had scheduled. The auditorium filled quickly with nervous employees who had heard rumors but didn't know the facts. My former coworkers from the analytics department stared in surprise when they saw me at the podium, dressed in executive attire instead of my usual business casual clothes. Victoria had been scheduled to announce a major restructuring that morning. Instead, she was being escorted out of the building under supervision. Good morning, I began once everyone had taken their seats. For those who don't know me, I'm Eve Montgomery. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Some of you knew me as Eve Daniels from the analytics department. That was intentional. For the past 3 years, I've worked alongside you, seeing firsthand how our culture and operations changed. I briefly explained what had happened. Victoria's removal, the canceled merger, the jobs that had been saved. With each detail, the tension in the room slowly eased into cautious relief. Yesterday, Victoria King fired me and called me dead weight, I continued. Today, I want to talk about what truly makes someone valuable at Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. I advanced to the first slide. Photos filled the screen. Employees from every department, researchers, office staff, maintenance teams. Value isn't defined by title or salary, I said. It's defined by integrity, commitment, and dedication to our mission, creating affordable, effective medications that improve lives. I walked them through the new restructuring plan, not Victoria's version, but one grounded in our core principles while adapting to real market conditions. No mass layoffs, no quality shortcuts, no abandoned research projects. We're also creating a new board position, I added, one that specifically represents employee interests, so your voices are heard at the highest level. As I spoke, I noticed my former analytics supervisor quietly wiping away tears. Nearby, researchers who had feared losing their jobs smiled with renewed hope. I also want to acknowledge the toxic leadership environment many of you have endured, I concluded. That ends today. The applause started slowly, then built into a powerful, sustained response. Later that day, Victoria stood in the lobby with security guards at her sides, waiting for her car. She was allowed to take personal belongings only. No files, no company data, no proprietary information. I approached her, keeping a respectful distance. "You won't succeed," she said bitterly. "The market is changing. Your father's approach is outdated. Montgomery will be obsolete within 5 years." "Maybe," I said, "but we'll be obsolete with our integrity intact." She laughed sharply. "Integrity doesn't pay shareholders. Sustainable growth built on quality products and ethical practices does," I replied. "It just requires patience and vision beyond quarterly reports." Her car pulled up. Before getting in, she turned back. "I almost feel sorry for you," she said. "You could have learned something from me." "I did learn from you, Victoria," I answered. "I learned exactly how I don't want to lead." She left without another word. Her defeat was complete. The company she tried to dismantle would now move forward without her, strengthened by the values she tried to erase. Back in my office, my father's former office, which Victoria had stripped down to cold, modern minimalism, I found Alan waiting with a bottle of champagne. "Congratulations," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so," I replied, taking the glass. "There's still a lot to fix." Alan smiled. "Now you have an entire company ready to help you fix it." He was right. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in years, Montgomery Pharmaceuticals was united by a shared purpose. On my desk sat a framed photo of my father that Victoria had removed. Beside it, I placed another picture, a candid shot from the company picnic last summer. Me laughing with my analytics team, unaware of the camera. Both images mattered. Montgomery the legacy, Eve the colleague. Together, they would guide the company forward. "To new beginnings," I said, raising my glass. "And to the best kind of revenge," Alan added. "Success on your own terms."